The rain, a relentless curtain of grey, hammered against the grimy window panes of Ethan Riley's cramped apartment, a rhythmic percussion against the city's hushed late-night symphony. It was a typical Tuesday in October, in a lesser-known corner of Boston, the kind of night when the world outside seemed to shrink into a blurred watercolor, leaving only the sharp edges of the interior. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of old paper, lukewarm coffee, and an undercurrent of something metallic, perhaps from the ancient dust motes dancing in the single shaft of light cast by his desk lamp. The flickering glow illuminated stacks of forgotten tomes, their spines cracked and pages brittle, alongside digital tablets displaying arcane cuneiform scripts. Ethan, a man perpetually lost in the past, hunched over a particularly large, leather-bound volume, his brow furrowed in concentration. His fingers, stained with ink and age-old grime from countless artifacts, traced glyphs that seemed to pulse with a silent, forgotten power. He was a historian, or rather, a self-appointed archaeologist of lost narratives, a man who saw more truth in the marginalia of Sumerian tablets than in any polished academic journal. His personal quest was to unearth the stories deliberately erased, the threads of history neatly snipped from the grand tapestry of human understanding. The apartment itself was a testament to this obsession. Every surface groaned under the weight of books, maps, and replicas of artifacts he couldn't afford to own. A faint chill seeped in from the poorly insulated window, a biting reminder of the encroaching autumn, yet Ethan remained oblivious, his focus absolute. The rhythmic tapping of his pen against his legal pad was the only sound breaking the rain's monopoly, a counterpoint to the distant wail of a siren, a faint, mournful cry swallowed by the city's vastness. The quiet was profound, almost unnatural for a city like Boston, a silence that felt less like peace and more like a held breath. It was the kind of quiet that suggested the world was listening, or perhaps waiting. Ethan paused, rubbing his tired eyes. He'd been staring at a particular passage for hours, a fragment of a translation that seemed to contradict itself, a linguistic knot that stubbornly refused to unravel. It spoke of sky-dwellers and celestial journeys, terms often dismissed as poetic hyperbole by his peers, but which, to Ethan, felt weighted with literal truth. He ran a hand through his perpetually disheveled brown hair, the strands stiff with the lingering scent of espresso. A vague sense of unease had begun to settle over him, a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, like an unseen presence. It wasn't paranoia, not exactly, but a deeper, more primal intuition that something was shifting beneath the surface of the mundane. He'd learned to trust these gut feelings. They were often the first whispers of a significant discovery. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier, dense with an unspoken expectation. The soft glow of the desk lamp felt suddenly inadequate, pushing back the shadows only weakly. Ethan shivered, though not from the cold. It was a chill that went bone deep, a tremor originating from a place beyond physical sensation. He closed his eyes, pressing his palms against his temples, trying to clear his mind, to banish the creeping tendrils of fatigue that threatened to unravel his concentration. But instead of clarity, a vivid image flashed behind his eyelids. Not a memory, but something akin to a prophecy, a sudden, blinding burst of light, followed by the unmistakable outline of a massive, winged disk etched against a crimson sky. It was gone as quickly as it came, leaving behind a lingering taste of ozone and ash in his mouth, a phantom echo of a thunderous roar that vibrated in his very bones. His eyes snapped open, wide and disoriented. The metallic tang in the air intensified, or perhaps it was just his imagination, a sensory echo of the startling vision. He looked around his study, the familiar chaos of books and papers suddenly feeling alien, imbued with a sinister potential. The framed reproduction of a Sumerian cylinder seal on his wall, usually a source of comfort, now seemed to stare back at him with knowing eyes. its tiny, intricate figures depicting what could only be interpreted as gods descending from the heavens. This wasn't just a random hallucination induced by lack of sleep. This felt like a call, a deep-seated recognition of something ancient stirring within him, triggered by the very texts he was poring over. It was a potent, unsettling blend of fascination and primal dread. The rain outside seemed to intensify its assault, as if responding to the inner turbulence that had just erupted within him. Nothing, he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the core, nothing would ever be quite the same again. The world, as he understood it, was about to unravel, and he was standing at the very precipice of that terrifying revelation. The weight of his obsession, usually a comforting burden, now felt like a lead cloak. He had always believed in uncovering hidden truths, but this felt like a truth that was uncovering him. The silence that followed his vision was even more unnerving than the vision itself, a silence pregnant with unasked questions and unspoken dangers. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. The quiet was no longer just the absence of sound. It was the quiet of anticipation, of an audience waiting for the next act. If this initial glimpse into Ethan's world, fraught with ancient mysteries and unsettling visions, has already made you question what you thought you knew, just imagine the revelations yet to unfold. So go ahead, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel right now, because here every video unearths something few dare to acknowledge. The lingering phantom vibration in his chest was almost unbearable, a low hum beneath his ribs that defied explanation. Ethan tried to dismiss it, to rationalize it away as a byproduct of exhaustion and too much caffeine, but the image of the winged disc, so vivid, so utterly real, clung to his mind like a burr. He glanced at the ancient clay tablet resting on its velvet cushion beside his laptop, its wedge-shaped marks a silent language whispered across millennia. It was a piece, a small fragment, acquired through a labyrinthine network of less than reputable dealers, which he had been diligently cross-referencing with official museum archives and digitized private collections. The specific text he was struggling with referred to a seventh star, a peculiar designation in Sumerian astronomy which typically used a base 60 system. Such an anomaly, he reasoned, usually pointed to a deliberate obfuscation or a profound forgotten meaning. He pushed his chair back, the worn wooden legs scraping loudly against the floorboards, a jarring sound in the heavy silence. He walked over to the small, grimy kitchenette, the faint smell of burnt toast from yesterday morning still clinging to the air. He poured himself a glass of lukewarm tap water, his hand trembling slightly. This wasn't the first time he'd experienced such an inexplicable surge of intuition, or a flash of an image that felt more like a memory than a figment. But this one was different. It carried a weight, a sense of undeniable significance that settled deep in his gut. It felt like a warning, a prelude. He peered out the window again, the rain now a mere drizzle, softening the city lights into hazy halos. The urban sprawl, usually a comfort in its predictable chaos, now seemed to hold its own secrets, its own layers of forgotten history beneath the concrete and glass. He knew the academic world considered his work fringe, his theories eccentric at best, delusional at worst. His colleagues at the university, mostly traditional historians steeped in verifiable facts and archaeological consensus, saw him as a brilliant but misguided eccentric, forever chasing ghosts in dusty texts. He was the one who dared to suggest that myths were not just allegories, but corrupted memories of real events, that gods were not just symbols, but perhaps visitors or even creators. This stance had cost him promotions, grants, and even some friendships, leaving him in this self-imposed scholarly exile. Yet the conviction remained, festering and growing with each new cryptic translation. He couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had forgotten something monumental, something that explained not just its origins, but its destiny. His gaze drifted back to the ancient texts, specifically a digital recreation of the Kish tablet, an artifact rumored to speak of pre-Diluvian kings and their divine lineage. The specific passage he focused on was a series of symbols that had always been translated as the watchful ones from above. But today, after the vision, the phrase resonated with a different, more chilling tone. The watchful ones from above, awaiting the return. The last two words had always been considered ambiguous, a poetic flourish, but now they felt like a direct, stark statement of intent. The rain had completely stopped, and a sudden, sharp gust of wind rattled the window, making the glass groan. The metallic smell in the air seemed to intensify, now tinged with something earthy, like wet stone. It was as if the ancient world itself was trying to break through the thin veil of modernity. Ethan walked back to his desk, his movements more deliberate, his mind racing. He picked up a magnifying glass, its polished brass cold against his fingers, and began to scrutinize the high-resolution image of the tablet on his screen. He zoomed in, pixel by pixel, searching for something, anything he might have overlooked. And then he saw it. Not a word, not a phrase, but a faint, almost invisible etching on the border of one of the cuneiform panels. It was barely visible, a deliberate attempt at concealment. It was a faint, circular symbol, nestled between two much more prominent, well-known Sumerian astrological signs representing Jupiter and Saturn. It was stylized, almost like an ancient glyph for a star, but with an unmistakable, subtle difference. A tiny, almost imperceptible dot in its center, surrounded by concentric rings, like a miniature solar system. It was not a star, not as conventionally depicted. It was a planet that didn't belong. His breath hitched. He knew the mainstream academic arguments, an artistic flourish, a scribe's error, a symbol of unknown meaning. But Ethan's gut screamed otherwise. This wasn't an error. This was a deliberate inclusion, a hidden clue, placed with incredible care and precision, designed to be seen only by those who looked beyond the obvious. It was the seventh star the text had mentioned, not a star at all, but a celestial body, perhaps a rogue planet, or one with a highly elliptical orbit that rarely brought it into common view. The metallic smell was now undeniably strong, sharp and coppery, like old blood mixed with iron. He felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and invigorating, coursing through his veins. This small, almost invisible symbol, hidden in plain sight, was the first concrete thread. It didn't scream Anunnaki or Nibiru directly, not yet, but it was a quiet, undeniable shift in his perception, a gentle nudge, a suggestion that the universe was far stranger than anyone dared to admit. The quiet dread that had settled upon him now mingled with an electrifying thrill of discovery, a potent cocktail that dissolved the last vestiges of his fatigue. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he was on the verge of something immense, something that would either validate his life's work or shatter his understanding of reality forever. The tension was palpable, a live wire humming in the space between him and the ancient text. He was no longer just reading history, he was feeling it pulse. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story is truly resonating with you, pulling you deeper into its web of ancient secrets. Then show your support for this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who absolutely needs to see this. The dot within the concentric rings, an almost imperceptible detail, became a gravitational center for Ethan's entire focus. He couldn't tear his eyes away from it. It was like finding a secret key in a meticulously crafted lock, a silent invitation to a forbidden chamber of knowledge. The faint, coppery scent in the room now felt less like a trick of his mind and more like a physical presence, a subtle alteration in the atmospheric pressure, a change that suggested something vast and unseen was pressing down, just beyond the veil of ordinary perception. He pulled out a worn-out copy of Zecharia Sitchin's The 12th Planet, a book he both admired for its audacious theories and sometimes dismissed for its speculative leaps. He flipped through the familiar pages, his fingers flying, until he found the diagrams and astronomical charts Sitchin had proposed, depicting Nibiru, the supposed 12th planet in our solar system, with its elongated, elliptical orbit. The illustrations, though modern interpretations, bore an uncanny, chilling resemblance to the tiny, concealed etching he had just discovered on the Sumerian tablet. His heart pounded a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a drumbeat of recognition and escalating dread. This wasn't merely a coincidence. It was a connection, a bridge spanning millennia, hinting at a shared knowledge that predated recorded history as it was commonly understood. He remembered countless sleepless nights spent poring over similar patterns, over symbols found in disparate cultures, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, Mayan codices, even obscure Native American petroglyphs, all of which contained similar motifs of celestial bodies, winged discs, or figures descending from the sky. He had always dismissed the idea of a single, unifying source as too grand, too fantastical, but now the tiny symbol on the Kish tablet replica screamed a different story. It whispered of a singular, shared origin for these seemingly disparate myths, a truth deliberately hidden, or perhaps simply lost in the sands of time. Ethan's routine was a monastic one, driven by an insatiable hunger for these forgotten narratives. He typically woke before dawn, fueled by strong black coffee brewed in a chipped ceramic mug, and immediately immersed himself in his research. His small kitchen often remained untouched for days, save for the microwave and the coffee maker, a testament to his single-minded dedication. Lunch was usually a stale bagel or a forgotten slice of pizza, consumed absently as his eyes scanned ancient texts. Evenings were a blurry continuation of mornings, often stretching past midnight, his only companions the quiet hum of his laptop and the distant city sounds. He carried a perpetual shadow under his eyes, a testament to his chosen path, but also a badge of honor for the sacrifices made in pursuit of knowledge. He was an outsider, always had been, since childhood, finding more comfort in the dusty pages of history books than in the fleeting interactions of superficial friendships. His fear wasn't of being wrong, but of being right, of unearthing a truth so profound and disruptive that it would fracture the very foundations of human civilization. The weight of such a potential revelation was a solitary burden, heavy and isolating. He often recalled his grandfather, a quirky, quiet man who had filled Ethan's childhood with stories of ancient civilizations, of pyramids built by unknown hands, of stars that held secrets beyond human comprehension. His grandfather had always encouraged Ethan's curiosity, telling him, "The greatest truths are often the ones whispered by the forgotten, my boy." That voice, tinged with a nostalgic warmth, now echoed in his mind, urging him forward, pushing him past the academic skepticism he had internalized over the years. He remembered a specific conversation, a chilly Thanksgiving afternoon when he was just a kid, probably 7 or 8. His grandfather, a former amateur astronomer with an almost spiritual reverence for the cosmos, had pointed to a bright star in the twilight sky. "See that, Ethan?" he'd said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "That's just one tiny point of light. Imagine what's out there, beyond what we can see, beyond what they want us to see. There are whole worlds, whole civilizations that have visited us, taught us, shaped us, and they'll come back." The memory, so vivid and unexpected, was the first emotional explosion. It hit him with the force of a physical blow, a surge of adrenaline that was part nostalgia, part a chilling confirmation. At the time, he'd dismissed it as harmless eccentricity, the musings of an old man. But now, as he stared at the hidden symbol, at the unmistakable depiction of a rogue planet, his grandfather's words weren't eccentricity. They were a prophecy, a whispered warning passed down through generations, perhaps even through bloodlines, an intuition that defied scientific explanation. It was a memory that should have been buried under layers of academic conditioning, but it had burst forth, fully formed and resonant, proving that the subconscious often knows more than the conscious mind dares to admit. The metallic tang in the air grew stronger, almost bitter, and the silence in the room became absolute, pressing in on him from all sides. The world outside, the bustling city, seemed to recede, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the burgeoning, terrifying truth. He felt a profound sense of isolation, not just physical, but existential. How many others had seen these same clues, felt these same premonitions, only to be silenced, ridiculed, or simply ignored by a world unwilling to confront its own carefully constructed realities? The weight of this burden, the understanding that he might be one of the few to truly see, was crushing. He pushed away from his desk again, pacing the small confines of his apartment, a caged animal, sensing an approaching storm. His fingers ran over the spines of his books, each title a silent witness to his journey. He picked up a small, smooth river stone he kept on his desk, a trinket from a childhood camping trip. Its coolness grounded him, momentarily anchoring him to the tangible. But even as he held it, his mind raced, connecting dots, drawing lines between ancient myths, astronomical oddities, and the chilling words of his late grandfather. The world, he now understood, was not just about to change, it was being remembered. The river stone, smooth and unassuming, felt surprisingly heavy in his palm, a small anchor in the swirling current of his thoughts. He kept walking, his gaze sweeping across the stacks of books, each representing a fragment of the sprawling puzzle he was trying to assemble. There were texts on Sumerian mythology, Babylonian astrology, Akkadian linguistics, and even a few on fringe archaeological theories. Every single one, in retrospect, seemed to whisper the same tale, a story deliberately obscured or fragmented into 1,000 different cultural narratives. He now saw the connections with startling clarity, like scattered stars suddenly forming a recognizable constellation. The ancient narratives of flood myths, of sky gods descending to earth, of giants walking among men, they weren't mere allegories. They were echoes distorted over millennia of a singular profound event, a recurring visitation that shaped not just human history but human evolution itself. His attention returned to the digital image of the Kish tablet. He cross-referenced the hidden planet symbol with other obscure diagrams he had found over the years. A curious petroglyph from Utah depicting a comet-like object with wings, a faint carving on a megalith in Peru showing what looked like planets orbiting an unseen sun, and even a medieval alchemical diagram that, when reinterpreted, seemed to chart an anomalous celestial path. The consistency across vastly different cultures and time periods was astounding, undeniable. It wasn't just Sitchin's theories anymore. It was an accumulating mountain of circumstantial evidence, now solidified by this tangible, hidden detail. The very air in his apartment seemed to crackle with an unseen energy, a silent hum that vibrated in his ears, a constant low-frequency thrum that he couldn't quite pinpoint. Was it the city's power grid, or something else, something far more ancient and resonant? He returned to his desk, the river stone now discarded, its grounding comfort no longer needed. A new, fierce determination coursed through him. He opened a fresh document on his laptop, his fingers poised over the keyboard. He needed to organize this, to structure his findings in a way that even the most skeptical academic couldn't ignore. He would weave the linguistic analysis with the astronomical data, the mythological narratives with the archaeological anomalies. He imagined the headlines, the fierce debates, the outright ridicule that would inevitably follow. But for the first time in a long time, the fear of professional ostracization faded into the background. A far greater truth was at stake. As he began to type, arranging the scattered pieces of his research into a coherent timeline, he stumbled upon an old, barely legible academic paper he had downloaded years ago from a defunct online archive. It was a dense, highly specialized analysis of ancient Mesopotamian cosmogony, penned by a notoriously obscure German scholar in the early 20th century. Most of it was standard fare, but tucked away in a footnote, almost as an aside, was a translation of a minor Sumerian poem. This poem, traditionally interpreted as a lament for a lost loved one, contained a single, enigmatic line that had always bothered him. When the seventh eye opens, the great water stirs, and the lords of the sky reclaim their legacy. He had dismissed it as metaphorical grief, but now, with the context of the hidden symbol, the phrase seventh eye clicked into place with terrifying precision. It wasn't an eye of sorrow, it was the seventh celestial body, the hidden planet. And the lords of the sky reclaim their legacy wasn't a lament, it was a prophecy. It wasn't just a slight change in perception, it was a monumental shift, transforming a seemingly innocuous poem into a stark, chilling warning of a cyclical return, of ancient forces stirring. He had found a key, not just to a specific text, but to an entire narrative of humanity's forgotten origins and its impending destiny. The world had just tilted on its axis. The implications flooded his mind, a torrent of information that threatened to overwhelm him. If this seventh eye truly was Nibiru, and if its opening heralded the stirring of the great water, a clear reference to a global cataclysm, a flood, then the lords of the sky, the Anunnaki, weren't just mythical figures. They were real, and they were returning. The air in his apartment felt suddenly thin, difficult to breathe. He felt a wave of dizziness, gripping the edge of his desk to steady himself. This wasn't just academic curiosity anymore. This was a direct, visceral threat, a timeline that was slowly, inexorably converging upon the present. He was no longer just an observer, he was a potential witness, or even worse, an unwilling participant. The rain outside resumed, a soft patter at first, then growing in intensity, as if mirroring the escalating storm within his own mind. The dizziness subsided, leaving behind a sharp, almost painful clarity. Ethan felt as if a heavy curtain had been pulled back from his eyes, revealing a universe far more complex and terrifying than he had ever dared to imagine. The academic paper, once a mere curiosity, now pulsed with a newfound significance, its obscure footnotes illuminating the darkest corners of ancient prophecies. He reread the line from the Sumerian poem, each word now weighted with an almost unbearable gravitas. When the seventh eye opens, the great water stirs, and the lords of the sky reclaim their legacy. It was no longer abstract poetry. It was a blueprint, a timeline, a chilling forecast of events that defied conventional understanding. The seventh eye, the hidden planet Nibiru, was not merely a theoretical construct, it was a celestial clock, ticking down to an appointed hour. Ethan's life had always been a quiet, solitary pursuit of truth, fueled by an insatiable curiosity and a deep-seated distrust of accepted narratives. He was raised in a modest suburban home in Ohio, a place where conformity was prized and deviation was often met with suspicion. His parents, both pragmatic accountants, struggled to understand his fascination with dead languages and mythical gods, gently pushing him towards more sensible career paths. But Ethan's mind had always gravitated towards the unknown, towards the gaps in history that others preferred to ignore. He found solace in libraries, losing himself among dusty shelves, imagining the lives and beliefs of ancient peoples. He was an introverted child, often found sketching fantastical creatures or intricate glyphs in his notebooks, while other kids were playing baseball or chasing fireflies. What he sought, above all, was coherence, a grand unified theory that would explain the myriad anomalies he encountered in his research. The impossible precision of ancient megalithic structures, the sudden explosion of human intelligence, the recurring motifs of advanced knowledge appearing in cultures separated by vast oceans and centuries. He harbored a secret fear, a gnawing suspicion that if he ever truly found the answer, it would be something so profound, so utterly disruptive, that it would shatter the fragile illusion of human autonomy and uniqueness. He feared the truth would reveal humanity as something less than masters of their own destiny, perhaps even as creations or experiments, rather than divine beings. This fear was a constant companion, a quiet whisper in the back of his mind, urging him to delve deeper, yet simultaneously warning him of the precipice. He had tried, in his early academic career, to forget some of the more radical ideas, to conform to the expectations of his peers. He had published several well-received papers on conventional Mesopotamian history, meticulously footnoted and safely within the bounds of archaeological consensus. But the pull of the forbidden knowledge was too strong. The nagging questions never truly went away. He'd tried to bury the memory of his grandfather's stories, to dismiss them as childhood fantasies, but they always resurfaced, particularly on nights like this, when the boundaries between reality and myth seemed to thin. The memory that surged forward now was not just of his grandfather, but of a specific exchange during his graduate studies at Boston University. He had been presenting a preliminary thesis on the astronomical sophistication of the Sumerians, suggesting they possessed knowledge far beyond what was credited to them. Dr. Alistair Finch, a renowned but notoriously conservative Assyriologist, had listened politely, then fixed Ethan with a look that was both pitying and dismissive. "Mr. Riley," Finch had said, his voice dripping with condescension, "while your enthusiasm for uncovering hidden truths is commendable, you must remember that correlation does not equal causation, and speculation, however imaginative, does not equate to fact. The Sumerians were brilliant, yes, but they were not stargazers charting interstellar highways. Let us not confuse myth with history, nor poetry with prophecy." This wasn't just a criticism. It was a personal dismissal, a public invalidation of his deepest instincts. The look in Dr. Finch's eyes, a cold, almost contemptuous assessment, had been the second emotional explosion. It hadn't altered the course of the conversation. It had ended it. It was a silent judgment that lingered long after the words faded, a memory that should have been buried under years of subsequent research and self-validation. But it hadn't. It had festered, a subtle wound that fueled his rebellious spirit. That dismissive glance, the implication that he was wasting his talent on childish fantasies, had ironically cemented his resolve to prove them all wrong. He wanted to show them that the universe held far more wonders and far more dangers than their carefully constructed academic boxes could ever contain. The metallic scent in the air now seemed to morph, taking on a faint, almost imperceptible smell of dust and dry earth, like a tomb freshly opened. The silence in his apartment, once merely heavy, now felt pregnant with unvoiced accusations, with the ghosts of forgotten scholars who had dared to see beyond the accepted narrative. He was no longer just chasing ghosts. He was now convinced he was uncovering a monumental deception, a deliberate obscuring of truth orchestrated by forces beyond human comprehension. And that, he realized, was a terrifying prospect. The echo of Dr. Finch's condescending tone still pricked at Ethan, a phantom sting reminding him of the solitary path he had chosen. It was a path paved with skepticism and ridicule, but also with an unwavering conviction that the real story of humanity lay buried beneath layers of misinterpretation and suppression. The faint scent of dust and dry earth now permeated the room, a subtle, primal aroma that spoke of ancient ruins and forgotten civilizations, a powerful contrast to the humid modernity of Boston. He found himself questioning everything he had ever been taught, every established fact that had shaped his understanding of history. If the seventh eye was indeed Nibiru, and if its return was cyclical, then how much of human history had been directly influenced, perhaps even manipulated by these lords of the sky, the Anunnaki? The thought sent a shiver down his spine, a cold dread that wrapped around his heart. He spent the next few hours in a feverish frenzy, cross-referencing every reference to celestial bodies, floods, and divine interventions across dozens of cultures. He pulled up digital scans of ancient Babylonian star maps, meticulously comparing them to modern astronomical data. He noticed discrepancies, subtle but significant, in the depiction of certain constellations, almost as if a specific celestial body had been deliberately omitted or its path altered in later astrological interpretations. He found correlations between the timing of major cataclysms described in various mythologies: the Great Flood, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the sinking of Atlantis, and what could only be interpreted as periods of celestial upheaval. It wasn't just individual myths. It was a global pattern, a series of events that pointed to an external recurring force. His fingers flew across the keyboard, typing furious notes, sketching diagrams, and connecting lines on a massive digital whiteboard that now dominated his main monitor. He saw how the Sumerian texts spoke of the Anunnaki arriving on Earth, bestowing knowledge, building cities, and even genetically engineering humanity to serve as laborers. He saw how these narratives mirrored stories from ancient Egypt, from Mayan mythology, from Hindu scriptures, all speaking of gods who came from the stars, who brought civilization, and who promised to return. The sheer scale of the deception, or the forgetting, was breathtaking, almost unfathomable. It suggested a deliberate erasure, a meticulous rewriting of history to suit a different narrative, one that kept humanity comfortably ignorant of its true origins and its true masters. The low hum in the air intensified, not unpleasant but profound, like the deep resonance of a distant bell. It filled the silence, a subtle reminder that he was not alone in his discoveries. He felt watched, not in a paranoid way, but in a sense that the universe itself was holding its breath, observing his journey, waiting for him to connect the final dots. He paused, rubbing his temples, feeling the familiar ache of strain behind his eyes. He got up, stretching his stiff limbs, and walked to the window. The city outside was quiet, bathed in the pale glow of streetlights, the rain having left the asphalt glistening like obsidian. A few cars passed, their headlights cutting momentary swathes through the darkness, their mundane passage a stark contrast to the cosmic drama unfolding in his mind. He looked up at the sky, a vast, star-prickled expanse, and felt a profound sense of both wonder and terror. Was Nibiru out there now, making its slow, inexorable journey back towards Earth? If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story is truly resonating with you, pulling you deeper into its web of ancient secrets. Then show your support for this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who absolutely needs to see this. He returned to his desk, his mind alight with a new, terrifying hypothesis. He pulled up an obscure, untranslated Akkadian tablet he had been working on for months, a piece discovered in a less publicized excavation in Iraq. It was highly fragmented, but what remained was a harrowing account of a celestial body, described as a radiant star that casts no light but shadows approaching Earth. The text explicitly stated that its arrival coincided with the awakening of the Elder Ones and a period of great tribulation. But what truly stunned him was a specific passage, a series of glyphs that he had previously interpreted as an astrological prediction of a comet. Now, with the context of the Sumerian seventh eye and Sitchin's theories, he saw it. The glyphs were not for a comet. They depicted a planet accompanied by smaller moon-like satellites, and its trajectory was unmistakably an elliptical path, one that intersected with Earth's orbit at regular, devastating intervals. It wasn't just a vague prophecy or a hidden symbol. It was a detailed astronomical chart, a chilling confirmation of Nibiru's existence and its cyclical return, explicitly linked to the Anunnaki. This discovery, staring back at him from the ancient clay, was more than just a theory. It was a partial, undeniable truth, a cosmic clock ticking down to zero. He finally grasped the horrific scope of what was truly happening, how Nibiru was not just a planet, but a harbinger, a celestial timer for the lords of the sky. The tension in the room coiled tighter, almost unbearable. His understanding of reality had just been fundamentally shattered. The fragmented Akkadian tablet, with its chilling astronomical chart, was an earthquake in Ethan's carefully constructed world. It wasn't just ancient myth, it was a cosmic calendar, a stark declaration of an impending rendezvous. He stared at the glyphs, the faint lines of the ancient script now glowing with a malevolent energy in his mind's eye. A radiant star that casts no light but shadows. This phrase haunted him, a paradox that perfectly described a planet, dark and dense, reflecting only the light of other stars, yet casting a shadow of profound cosmic influence. The accompanying depiction of the planet, with its retinue of moons locked in an elliptical dance, left no room for doubt. This was Nibiru, the planet of the Anunnaki, the very world that Sitchin had theorized, now confirmed by a text thousands of years old. The implications were staggering, almost too vast for his human mind to fully encompass. The atmosphere in his apartment thickened, heavy with the weight of ancient secrets finally exposed. The metallic scent was now undeniable, a subtle taste on his tongue, like fresh copper. The low hum, which he had initially dismissed as ambient city noise or a trick of his weary mind, now resonated with a distinct, almost rhythmic pulse, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to emanate from the very floorboards beneath his feet. He could almost feel the presence of unseen eyes, ancient, patient, watching his every move, waiting for him to fully comprehend the magnitude of his discovery. This was no longer just about academic validation, it was about survival, about understanding a truth that could either save humanity or condemn it. His research intensified, becoming an all-consuming obsession. Sleep became a luxury he could no longer afford, his waking hours blurring into an endless cycle of deciphering, cross-referencing, and hypothesizing. He delved into the minutiae of Sumerian creation myths, focusing on the epic of Enuma Elish, where the god Marduk battles the primordial chaos monster Tiamat. Mainstream scholars interpreted Tiamat as a mythical personification of the sea. But Ethan now saw a different narrative. Tiamat as an ancient planet, shattered by a collision with another celestial body, perhaps a rogue moon of Nibiru itself, creating Earth and the asteroid belt. The Anunnaki, the gods who orchestrated this cosmic ballet, weren't just mythological figures. They were cosmic architects, genetic engineers, and manipulators of destiny. He noticed how many ancient cultures across the globe spoke of a golden age, followed by a cataclysm, a pattern that aligned perfectly with the cyclical return of Nibiru. The Hopi, the Maya, the ancient Egyptians, all had tales of cosmic cycles, of ages ending and beginning, often marked by celestial events and the arrival or departure of sky people. He found recurring symbols of winged suns, winged discs and feathered serpents, all of which, when seen through the lens of Nibiru and the Anunnaki, took on a chillingly literal meaning. These weren't just religious symbols, they were historical records, encoded messages left by those who knew, a silent warning to future generations. The sounds in his apartment grew more pronounced. He would hear faint whispers, not actual words, but the impression of voices, ancient and resonant, just at the edge of his perception. He'd catch glimpses of fleeting shadows in his peripheral vision, quick as a blink, vanishing before he could fully register them. He dismissed them as tricks of the light, products of his overstressed mind, but a part of him, a primal, intuitive part, knew better. These were not hallucinations. They were manifestations, subtle probes from entities operating beyond the conventional five senses, testing the waters, assessing his progress. The boundary between his reality and the ancient, hidden reality was blurring, eroding with each new discovery. He pondered the arrogance of humanity, of its scientific establishment, in dismissing these ancient narratives as primitive superstition. How could they have been so blind, so unwilling to consider a reality beyond their immediate comprehension? He understood now that it wasn't just ignorance. It was a carefully cultivated amnesia, perhaps even a deliberate suppression orchestrated by the lords of the sky themselves, who wanted humanity to remain docile, unaware of its true heritage and its true purpose. The thought was chilling, transforming the universe from a vast, indifferent void into a stage for an ancient cosmic drama with humanity as its unwitting players. He stood up again, pacing the small room, his mind alight with a furious intensity. He had to share this. He had to warn. But how? Who would believe him? The academic world had already branded him an eccentric. The general public would dismiss him as a conspiracy theorist. He needed irrefutable proof, something beyond ancient texts and obscure symbols. He needed a modern connection, a contemporary echo of the ancient prophecy. The rain outside picked up again, a steady drumming on the roof, mirroring the frantic beat of his heart. The storm was gathering, not just outside, but within him, and within the very fabric of reality he was now uncovering. He felt a profound sense of urgency, a desperate need to complete his work before it was too late. He was no longer just a historian. He was a prophet, burdened with a revelation that could either save or destroy. The urgency gnawed at Ethan, a relentless internal clock ticking down, fueled by the accelerating revelations from the ancient texts. He felt like a man standing on a deserted beach, watching a tsunami cresting on the horizon, while the rest of the world remained blissfully ignorant, building sandcastles. The metallic tang in the air had intensified, almost like the scent of an impending lightning storm, charged with ozone and an inexplicable sense of ancient power. The low hum, once subtle, now felt like a deep bass note in the symphony of the universe, a constant presence that vibrated through his bones, resonating with the very core of his being. He found himself pausing, listening intently, trying to discern patterns in the sound, or perhaps messages. His mind raced through a myriad of possibilities, trying to find a modern echo, a contemporary piece of the puzzle that would validate the ancient prophecies. He thought of all the unexplained phenomena, UFO sightings, strange geological shifts, anomalous archaeological discoveries, conveniently dismissed or hidden away. Were these all manifestations of the seventh eye's approach? Subtle tremors preceding the main earthquake? He recalled news reports of strange atmospheric phenomena, unusual magnetic readings, even accounts of people experiencing vivid, collective dreams of a red planet in the sky. Could these be the first whispers of Nibiru's return, unconsciously perceived by a collective human subconscious? He remembered a conversation with an old acquaintance, Dr. Lena Petrova, a brilliant but equally marginalized astrophysicist he had met at a fringe science conference years ago. She had been presenting data on inexplicable gravitational anomalies in the outer solar system, suggesting the presence of a massive, unseen celestial body. At the time, Ethan had listened with polite interest, filing her theories away as intriguing but unprovable. Now her words returned to him with a chilling clarity, like pieces of a larger mosaic suddenly falling into place. Her data wasn't just theoretical, it was empirical evidence of Nibiru's existence, observed through its gravitational influence on distant celestial objects. The thought was electrifying, providing the modern scientific validation he desperately needed. He frantically searched for her contact information, digging through old emails and crumpled business cards. He finally found it, a faded card tucked inside an old copy of Carl Sagan's Cosmos. He hesitated for a moment, his finger hovering over his phone's dial pad. What would he say? "Hey, Lena, remember those gravitational anomalies? Turns out it's the Anunnaki planet, and they're coming back." He knew how insane that would sound. But the stakes were too high to care about sounding crazy. The world needed to know. The planet needed to be warned. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story is truly resonating with you, pulling you deeper into its web of ancient secrets. Then show your support for this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who absolutely needs to see this. He decided against a direct call, opting for an email instead, carefully crafting a message that hinted at a major breakthrough in his Sumerian research, subtly referencing her astrophysics work and suggesting a confidential meeting. He clicked send, a profound sense of relief washing over him, followed immediately by an even deeper wave of anxiety. He had just set something in motion, something irreversible. He returned to his research, but his focus was fractured, his mind constantly darting to the impending meeting with Lena. He felt a subtle shift in the energy of his apartment, a pervasive tension that stretched taut, like a violin string about to snap. He was no longer just decoding ancient history, he was actively stepping into it, becoming a part of the unfolding prophecy. The shadows in his peripheral vision seemed to grow bolder, almost solidifying into fleeting forms, ancient figures just at the edge of his sight. He would turn his head sharply, only to find nothing there, just the familiar, cluttered mess of his study. But the feeling of being watched, of being observed by ancient, silent entities, was now undeniable, a constant, chilling presence. As he reviewed his notes, a specific detail he had initially dismissed as a stylistic choice now screamed for attention. In several Sumerian and Akkadian texts, there were subtle variations in the description of a specific constellation, the Plough, Ursa Major. In later versions, it was always depicted with 7 stars, but in the oldest, most obscure fragments, he found depictions that showed 8 stars, with one almost completely faded, as if deliberately obscured or removed. It was a single tiny anomaly, easily overlooked. But now, paired with the Akkadian tablet's astronomical chart and Lena's gravitational anomaly data, it clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The 8th star wasn't a star at all. It was a cosmic marker, a celestial signpost pointing to the presence of Nibiru. Its erasure from later star charts was a deliberate act of historical manipulation, a lie perpetuated for millennia. This wasn't just an academic discovery, it was a profound personal realization. He wasn't merely studying the Anunnaki, he was being observed by them, his path subtly guided, his discoveries facilitated by forces that understood the grand cosmic game. He realized, with a cold certainty that seeped into his bones, that he was caught in a current far stronger and deeper than he could ever comprehend, a tide of destiny orchestrated by unseen hands. He was a pawn in an ancient game, and the board was the entire earth. The world had just revealed itself as a stage, and he, a reluctant actor. The realization that he was not an independent investigator but a pawn, subtly guided by unseen forces, was both terrifying and strangely liberating for Ethan. The fear of external judgment, of academic ridicule, seemed to recede, replaced by a profound sense of destiny. The ancient manipulation of star charts, the deliberate erasure of Nibiru's presence, was a lie woven into the very fabric of human knowledge. And he, Ethan Riley, was the one designated to unravel it. The low hum in his apartment now felt less like a distant drone and more like a resonant frequency vibrating through him, aligning with the sudden clarity of his purpose. The metallic tang in the air seemed to sharpen, like the scent of a hidden ancient machinery slowly grinding back to life. He knew Lena Petrova would be skeptical, at least initially. Her scientific training would demand empirical data, verifiable observations. But he had the ancient texts, the astronomical charts, the mythological correlations, and now the compelling narrative of deliberate historical obfuscation. He would present it to her not as an archaeologist, but as a detective, piecing together fragments of a millennia-old crime scene. He imagined her initial resistance, her logical objections, but he also remembered the glint in her eyes when she spoke of gravitational anomalies, the passionate conviction that there was something profoundly significant just beyond the edge of human perception. She, too, had felt the whispers of the forgotten. While he waited for her response, Ethan plunged deeper into the more esoteric aspects of his research. He began exploring the concept of collective consciousness, of ancient memories encoded within human DNA, passed down through generations. He considered the possibility that the emotional explosions he had experienced, the vision of the winged disc, his grandfather's prophecy, Dr. Finch's dismissive glance, were not just psychological events, but faint echoes of these encoded memories, triggered by his proximity to the truth. It was a radical idea, even for him, but it offered a plausible explanation for the uncanny feeling of recognition, the sense that he was merely remembering something humanity had collectively forgotten. He examined ancient rituals and prophecies that spoke of the time of reckoning, of a great cleansing that would precede a new age. These were often interpreted spiritually as moral judgments or divine interventions. But Ethan now saw them as direct references to the cyclical return of Nibiru and the subsequent reclaiming of legacy by the Anunnaki. He found texts that detailed specific astronomical alignments, precise measurements of celestial cycles, which, when translated and cross-referenced with modern calculations, pointed to an approaching date, a convergence point in Earth's history. The sense of urgency grew even more acute, tightening its grip on his chest. The sounds in his apartment intensified, growing from whispers to distinct, though unintelligible, murmurs. He would sometimes catch what sounded like an ancient language, deep and guttural, resonating from the walls themselves. He even started to see fleeting, distorted reflections in his computer screen, not of himself, but of towering, unfamiliar figures, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light, their forms briefly shimmering before vanishing. He knew intellectually that he was pushing the boundaries of his sanity, that prolonged sleep deprivation and extreme stress could induce such hallucinations. But intuitively, he felt these were not mere figments of a tired mind. They were direct communications, glimpses behind the curtain, validations of his journey. They were the silent watchers, showing him fragments of themselves, affirming his role. He remembered a particular Sumerian myth about a king who sought forbidden knowledge, who was granted visions by the gods, but whose sanity was ultimately shattered by the overwhelming truth. Ethan felt a chilling kinship with that mythical king. He was walking a fine line, balanced precariously between enlightenment and madness. Yet, he couldn't stop. The truth, once glimpsed, was an insatiable hunger, a powerful current that pulled him deeper and deeper into its dark embrace. The outside world, with its mundane concerns and trivialities, felt distant, irrelevant. His entire universe had shrunk to the four walls of his apartment, filled with ancient echoes and the silent, watchful presence of entities from beyond the stars. The rain had stopped outside, but the sky remained a dense, impenetrable grey, as if holding its breath. The air grew still, heavy, a suffocating blanket of impending change. He felt a prickling sensation on his skin, a faint electrical current running through his body, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. This wasn't just a discovery, it was an awakening, not just for him, but for something far older, far more powerful, that had been slumbering for millennia. He felt a profound sense of dread, mixed with an almost intoxicating exhilaration. He was unearthing the true history of his species, and in doing so, he was unlocking a destiny that had been carefully hidden from humanity for eons. The weight of this knowledge was immense, a burden he knew he would carry alone, until the moment of truth arrived. The profound mix of dread and exhilaration became Ethan's new normal, a constant companion as he navigated the increasingly blurred lines between ancient texts and modern reality. The very air around him seemed to thicken with a palpable, invisible presence, the metallic tang now sharper, more intense, like the smell of impending doom or revelation. The low hum persisted, a deep, resonant chord that seemed to vibrate not just in his ears, but in the very core of his being, a subtle frequency connecting him to something vast and ancient. He felt less like an independent researcher and more like an antenna, attuned to cosmic signals that most of humanity remained deaf to. His email to Lena Petrova felt like a desperate plea cast into a vast, indifferent ocean. He knew it might be ignored, dismissed, or even seen as a sign of his complete mental unraveling, but he had to try. The stakes, he now understood, were nothing less than the future of human civilization. He spent hours refining his presentation, meticulously cross-referencing astronomical data points from Lena's published papers with the newly deciphered trajectory of Nibiru from the Akkadian tablet. He was building a bridge between two seemingly disparate worlds, the quantifiable universe of astrophysics and the forgotten cosmos of ancient myth. The shadows that danced at the periphery of his vision grew more substantial, more defined. He'd catch fleeting glimpses of tall, slender figures, their forms almost translucent, their movements silent and swift. Sometimes he'd hear faint whispers that were not quite English, but a language that resonated deep within his subconscious, a language that felt both alien and strangely familiar. He'd find himself instinctively understanding a word, a phrase, only to have it dissolve before he could consciously grasp it. He began to suspect that these were not mere hallucinations, but actual presences, entities observing him, perhaps even subtly influencing his thoughts, pushing him towards the next crucial discovery. They were the lords of the sky, the Anunnaki themselves, or their emissaries, silently guiding his hand, ensuring the prophecy would be revealed. His growing isolation intensified. He stopped answering calls from his few remaining academic contacts, fearing their skepticism would dilute his resolve. He ordered groceries online, avoiding all human contact. The outside world, with its daily routines and trivial concerns, felt increasingly distant, almost dreamlike. His only reality was the ancient past and the impending future, converging in his small, cluttered apartment. He felt an intense, almost unbearable pressure, a crushing weight of knowledge that he alone seemed capable of bearing. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story is truly resonating with you, pulling you deeper into its web of ancient secrets. Then show your support for this content, hit that like button now, and share it with someone who absolutely needs to see this. One evening, as the rain once again lashed against his window, a single, unexpected email arrived. It was from Lena. The subject line was terse. "Intrigued, send details, meet tomorrow, my lab 7 p.m. A surge of relief, potent and overwhelming, coursed through him. She hadn't dismissed him. She was willing to listen. But beneath the relief, a new layer of dread emerged. He was about to expose the truth to another human being, to pull someone else into this terrifying maelstrom of ancient prophecy and cosmic manipulation. The gravity of that decision pressed down on him with immense force. He spent the rest of the night preparing, meticulously organizing his notes, his translations, his astronomical diagrams, and his cross-cultural comparisons. He wanted every piece of evidence to be irrefutable, every conclusion to be inescapable. He practiced what he would say, how he would explain the unexplainable, how he would bridge the chasm between ancient myth and modern science. He even considered bringing one of his replica Sumerian tablets, but decided against it. It would only fuel her scientific skepticism. He needed to appeal to her intellect, her own intuition for the unseen forces of the cosmos. As dawn approached, painting the sky with bruised purples and greys, Ethan felt a sudden, profound calm settle over him. It wasn't the calm of peace, but the quiet stillness before a storm, the eye of the hurricane. He looked at his reflection in the dark screen of his monitor, a gaunt, weary face, eyes bloodshot but gleaming with an unnerving intensity. He barely recognized the man staring back at him. He was no longer just Ethan Riley, the obscure historian. He was something else, something forged in the crucible of forbidden knowledge, a conduit for a truth humanity had long suppressed. He had stepped fully into the prophecy, and there was no turning back. The metallic smell in the air seemed to cling to his skin, a subtle, almost imperceptible sheen, like ancient dust or something alien. He was ready. The profound sense of isolation still lingered, but it was now tempered by a new sense of purpose. He was no longer just deciphering forgotten texts. He was now actively participating in the unfolding of a cosmic event. The whispers had become a chorus, the shadows more defined, and the hum a constant, resonant vibration that coursed through his very being. He felt an undeniable connection to something vast and ancient, a profound sense of belonging to a narrative that spanned millennia. He was part of the story, and the story, he knew, was far from over. The meeting with Dr. Lena Petrova was set for 7 p.m., but by 6:30, Ethan was already hovering outside the astrophysics lab building, a sterile modern structure that felt starkly out of place compared to the ancient dust that permeated his own life. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the distant exhaust fumes of the city, a stark contrast to the coppery, ancient smell he'd grown accustomed to in his apartment. He clutched his worn leather satchel, filled with his carefully prepared evidence, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. This was it, the moment of truth. He was about to lay bare the cosmic secrets, to expose a reality that would either galvanize Lena or confirm his own descent into madness. Lena, when she finally emerged from a side office, was exactly as he remembered, sharp, focused, with an almost electric intensity in her dark eyes. Her short, silver-streaked hair framed a face etched with the lines of relentless intellectual pursuit. She wore a practical lab coat over a plain turtleneck, exuding an air of no-nonsense professionalism. "Riley," she greeted, her voice calm but with an underlying current of curiosity. "You made it. You said you had something urgent, something that might connect to my work on gravitational anomalies. Don't waste my time." Her directness was refreshing, cutting through his anxiety. He followed her into her sprawling lab, a veritable playground of scientific instruments, humming servers, glowing monitors displaying complex algorithms and star charts, sleek telescopes pointed at the ceiling. The environment, so utterly modern, felt like a jarring juxtaposition to the ancient truths he was about to unleash. He laid out his findings on a large, illuminated workbench, carefully arranging the printed excerpts of Sumerian and Akkadian texts, the high-resolution images of the hidden glyphs, the reinterpreted star charts, and the compiled mythological correlations. He began to speak, his voice initially hesitant, but gaining confidence as he explained the deliberate obfuscation of the seventh eye, the hidden planet within ancient texts, and how it correlated with Lena's own data on unexplained gravitational perturbations in the outer solar system. He showed her the Akkadian tablet's orbital diagram, the explicit trajectory of Nibiru, and then overlaid it with a modern astronomical simulation of her observed anomalies. The correlation was startling, undeniable. Lena listened intently, her expression unreadable, her gaze shifting between Ethan and the evidence spread before her. She asked probing questions, challenging his translations, questioning his interpretations, pushing the boundaries of his theories. But Ethan met each challenge with a calm, well-reasoned response, referencing historical contexts, linguistic nuances, and cross-cultural parallels. He saw the shift in her eyes, a flicker of recognition, a dawning comprehension that slowly replaced her initial skepticism. The metallic scent in the air seemed to deepen, and the low hum of the lab equipment around them seemed to synchronize with the ancient vibration Ethan felt within him, creating a profound, resonant chord. Then came the fourth emotional explosion. As Ethan explained the final piece, a complex numerical sequence he had found in a barely preserved Babylonian clay cylinder, Lena's eyes widened. He showed her how this sequence, when converted from a base 60 system to a modern decimal system, correlated precisely with the estimated orbital period of Nibiru, and more chillingly, with specific dates of historical cataclysms, including the Great Flood. As he pointed to the final calculation, a date within the next decade, a sudden blinding flash erupted from one of Lena's advanced optical sensors mounted on a tripod in the corner. The sensor, designed to detect faint light from distant galaxies, had suddenly overloaded, its internal display flickering wildly before going dark. A deep, resonant hum, far louder and more profound than anything Ethan had ever experienced, filled the lab, vibrating through the very concrete floor. It was a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a primal frequency that resonated deep within his bones, a sound that transcended mere acoustics. The air crackled with raw, unseen energy, and for a fleeting, terrifying moment, the pristine, sterile lab seemed to warp and shimmer, revealing an ancient, starlit vista, a glimpse of towering, shadowy figures observing them from beyond the veil. It was a vision that tore the line between the real and the impossible, revealing not just a hidden planet, but a living, breathing, ancient entity, a fragment of a past extraterrestrial presence that was not just returning, but had never truly left. This was a direct, undeniable manifestation, confirming that the Anunnaki were real, their presence tangible, and their return imminent. The truth was not just devastating, it was alive. The raw, primal hum reverberated through Ethan's very being, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. The flash from the optical sensor, the flickering display, the brief, horrifying glimpse of towering, shadowy figures watching from the starlit void. It was undeniable. Lena, usually composed, stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. Her carefully constructed scientific skepticism had just been utterly annihilated by an empirical, visceral encounter with the impossible. The metallic tang in the air now felt like a physical pressure, pressing down on them, an ancient breath filling the modern lab. What was that?" Lena whispered, her voice barely audible, hoarse with shock. Her gaze, once filled with professional curiosity, now reflected a profound, dawning horror. She looked at Ethan, no longer seeing an eccentric historian, but a prophet of a terrifying truth. Ethan, though equally shaken, felt a strange sense of vindication. The Watchers had revealed themselves, if only for a fleeting moment, to affirm his journey, to validate his desperate warnings. "They're here, Lena," he said, his own voice raspy. "They've always been here, watching, waiting. And now they're making their presence known. Nibiru is not just a planet, it's their vessel, their home. And it's coming back." Lena, a scientist to her core, immediately moved to the optical sensor, her hands trembling as she tried to revive its flickering display. But it was dead, utterly unresponsive. She then turned to her main console, her fingers flying across the keyboard, accessing other sensor arrays, external astronomical observatories, desperate for any data that could explain what had just happened. But all systems reported normal, a chilling silence in the face of the undeniable reality they had just witnessed. It was as if the event had been localized, a message specifically for them, deliberately hidden from the broader scientific gaze. Ethan continued, his words now flowing with an almost frantic energy driven by the urgency of the moment. He explained the Anunnaki's role in human history, their alleged genetic manipulation of early hominids, their creation of civilization, their cyclical returns coinciding with major cataclysms. He spoke of their vast knowledge, their advanced technology, and their ultimate purpose, to harvest Earth's resources, particularly gold, for their own dying planet. He spoke of humanity as a carefully cultivated resource, a workforce, a grand experiment. Lena listened, her initial shock slowly giving way to a fierce, intellectual struggle to process the overwhelming information. She was a woman of science, trained to seek logical explanations, empirical proofs. But what she had just experienced, what Ethan was now explaining, transcended all logical frameworks. Yet the pieces were fitting together, clicking into place with an unnerving coherence that defied easy dismissal. The gravitational anomalies she had spent years tracking, the hidden glyphs, the ancient prophecies, they all pointed to the same terrifying conclusion. "But why us?" Lena finally asked, her voice filled with a desperate plea for understanding. "Why reveal this now? Why to you?" "Because the cycle is almost complete, Lena," Ethan responded, his gaze intense, unwavering. "The prophecies speak of a final warning, a time when humanity must choose its path. To acknowledge its creators, its masters, or to remain in blissful ignorance until it's too late. I think they're guiding us. They want us to understand. Or perhaps they want us to fear." The metallic scent, he noticed, now carried a faint, almost imperceptible undertone of something else, ozone and sulfur, like a distant burning star. The sheer scale of the revelation was almost unbearable. Humanity was not the apex of creation, not the sole intelligent species in the universe. It was a legacy, an inheritance, a cosmic project of an ancient advanced civilization that saw Earth as a temporary outpost, a resource. The thought was humbling, terrifying, and liberating all at once. The world, he realized, was not just on the brink of a scientific revolution, but on the precipice of an existential reckoning. He understood now the meaning of the final warning. It wasn't just a literal warning about Nibiru's approach. It was a warning about humanity's complacency, its self-imposed blindness, its refusal to look beyond its own limited perceptions. It was a challenge, a test from the very entities who had engineered its existence. The decision, he realized, was now in their hands, to ignore the warning and face inevitable destruction, or to awaken to the truth and prepare for the return of the Lords of the Sky. The responsibility felt crushing, almost impossible to bear. If you've made it this far without pausing, it's because this story is truly resonating with you, pulling you deeper into its web of ancient secrets. Then show your support for this content. Hit that like button now and share it with someone who absolutely needs to see this. The weight of the final warning settled heavy in the air between Ethan and Lena, a palpable force that seemed to distort the very light in the lab. Lena, for her part, was a whirlwind of frantic energy, though it was a controlled scientific frenzy. She moved from console to console, pulling up star charts, cross-referencing ancient texts with astronomical anomalies, her fingers flying across keyboards. Her initial shock had morphed into a desperate search for quantifiable data, for a way to translate Ethan's terrifying prophecies into the language of science. She was trying to fit the universe-shattering truth into a framework she could understand, a logical sequence of events. Ethan watched her, a faint, melancholic smile playing on his lips. He understood her struggle. For years he had been doing the same, trying to rationalize the irrational, to quantify the divine. But now, after the manifest presence in the lab, after glimpsing the shadowy figures and hearing the primal hum, he knew some truths simply defied conventional understanding. They had to be felt, experienced, absorbed into the very fabric of one's being. The metallic tang in the air now had a strange, almost sweet undertone, like distant flowers blooming in a barren landscape, a paradoxical scent of creation amidst destruction. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small, intricately carved obsidian shard he had acquired years ago from a dealer who claimed it was a pre-Columbian artifact. He had always been drawn to its smooth, dark surface, feeling an inexplicable resonance with it. He handed it to Lena. "This," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "is not just a piece of rock. It's a key. Look closely." Lena, her brow furrowed in concentration, took the shard. She turned it over in her hand, her scientific eye immediately noting the impossibly smooth surface, the minute, almost invisible etchings that covered it. She picked up a powerful magnifying glass, its lens cold and precise, and brought it close to the obsidian. What she saw made her gasp. The etchings weren't random patterns. They were a miniature, incredibly detailed star map, showing not only the known constellations, but also the trajectory of the seventh eye, Nibiru, and even more shockingly, a series of symbols that depicted a genetic helix intertwined with what looked like ancient human figures and the towering forms of the Anunnaki. It was a condensed history, a blueprint of creation, a warning, all etched onto a single piece of volcanic glass. This was the fifth emotional explosion. It wasn't a lie or a secret revealed. It was a tangible, undeniable artifact that defied all known human technology of its supposed era. Lena's logical mind struggled to reconcile the obsidian's age with its impossible detail and content. The shard pulsed faintly in her hand, a subtle warmth emanating from its cold surface, a warmth that seemed to synchronize with the beat of her own heart. She looked up at Ethan, her eyes wide with a profound, almost spiritual understanding. This is impossible," she whispered, her voice raw with awe and terror. "This changes everything." The obsidian wasn't just a map. It was an artifact imbued with ancient life, a piece of living history, pulsing with the very essence of the Anunnaki themselves. It was the final, devastating piece of the puzzle, a physical manifestation of their truth. If this content has shattered your perceptions, opened your mind to the impossible, and left you questioning everything, then comment below, "I saw what he saw." This helps us understand who truly seeks knowledge beyond the superficial. Like the video, subscribe to the channel now and activate that notification bell, because the next episodes will delve even deeper into the cosmos. And don't leave without clicking on the next video. It's the continuation of this profound journey. Ethan met her gaze, his own eyes filled with the weariness of ages, yet burning with an unshakable conviction. "Impossible only until it's revealed," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "This shard, Lena, is more than a map. It's their signature. It shows their history with us, their arrival, their shaping of humanity, their cyclical returns for resources, and the final warning encoded into our myths, our DNA, our very consciousness. Nibiru isn't just approaching. It's completing a cycle they engineered millennia ago. They built us, they nurtured us, and they warned us. Now the choice is ours, to awaken to their return, to embrace the truth of our origins, or to let the coming shadow consume us in our ignorance." He paused, looking around the lab, then back at Lena, her face illuminated by the subtle, otherworldly glow of the obsidian shard. "The prophecy isn't about what they'll do, Lena. It's about what we'll become when they return. Will we be ready to meet our creators, our masters, our manipulators, or will we merely be harvested?" The rain outside began anew, a soft, mournful whisper against the glass, mingling with the low, resonant hum that still filled the lab. The obsidian shard pulsed in Lena's hand, a silent, ancient heart beating in the modern world. Ethan said nothing more, letting the weight of his words, the terror of the obsidian's revelation, and the profound, open-ended question hang in the still, charged air. The truth was not a simple answer, but an overwhelming impact, a new reality that would forever redefine humanity's place in the cosmos. He left Lena standing amidst her scientific instruments, clutching the ancient shard, her face etched with a dawning, terrible understanding. The universe, he knew, was vast and indifferent, yet intricately connected, and humanity was merely a single, small thread in a tapestry woven by beings far older, far more powerful than any god we had ever conceived. The story was far from over. It was merely beginning, an echo resonating across the void, an invitation to gaze into the abyss and finally see.